So I'm just going to sort of give an introductory to kind of what I do. Let's keep it down to about 5 minutes, go through a lot of slides, and then we're going to have some conversations because I'm here with two incredibly remarkable women. So New Frontier, for those of you who don't know what it is a kind of an experimentation festival inside of a festival. Sundance is a discovery festival, and we follow the artists, and we're there to support artists that are generally not supported in like the studio system, and we're looking to excavate independent vision. So New Frontier was something that came together. Where are we here? There we go, that's Sundance. So New Frontier was really built because we were seeing a couple of things that were happening. There were cinematic visions in the art world that were coming in ready to go for the stage, on the cinematic stage, like John Mabry, Miranda July. Also, the rise of YouTube was starting to basically redefine the role of our artists in the world. Instead of making films that will entertain, short films were starting to become a way of communicating with one another, because YouTube at the time was the biggest search engine under Google, which of course that's why Google bought it. And then there were filmmakers who were very, very interested in experimenting. So we decided to create New Frontier as an interdisciplinary space, showcase, to bring these worlds together, to take them out of the silos and put them together, and put them into a social space. We're very interested in not making a black box or a white box, not art at Sundance. We wanted to make this a very social experiment, and create a space that appealed to our audiences through their bodies in a sensual way. So that's why this looks like a lounge and not a theater or an art gallery. So the history of VR, because we're talking about VR here, you know, one of the things that's sort of like the golden fleece for us at New Frontier is our interest in the worlds that happen when you put two different worlds together. When you put people together and mix it up, things actually create, and the whole becomes larger than the sum of its parts. And VR was one of those moments that happened at New Frontier. Following Nani de la Peña, because of her work in Second Life, as a journalist, this interdisciplinary practice, and she said, Shari, you got to come to my studio. So I went, and I tried VR for the first time. I tried that really badass headset that cost $50,000. And I experienced Hunger in Los Angeles for the first time. It was amazing, and I said, yes, to make a long story short, come to Sundance. And USC was like, well, no. You're not going to take our $50,000 headset to Sundance. So what she did was she worked with her 17-year-old intern, Palmer Luckey, and created this duct tape thing, which is essentially the prototype for Oculus Rift. And we brought it, and people lined up, and people fell to the ground when the guy fell out from an epileptic coma because he was hungry. And it was just a huge hit. I followed the technology. Well, Palmer, because after that, Palmer had set a Kickstarter, tried to raise some money to create a consumer version, and raised lots of money. And I was like, well, okay, what do you got? Let's bring it back. This is obviously something very powerful. I felt really obligated as a curator to stay involved with it. And so we brought it back and highlighted the technology in 2014, and showed a number of pieces that we could talk about later. But this is what the 2014 show looked like. We created these, we're trying to figure out, like, how do you show this new technology when it's all inside? But obviously, people love watching people in VR. That hasn't gone away, which is interesting. It's notable. People still love watching people do VR. So we created these thrones that were reflective so that people can actually reflect that they are watching someone watching VR that's in a virtual reality. And that just really ended up a successful thing to do. The March after that festival, Facebook bought the technology for $2 billion and really shifted. Basically, it was the beginning of the takeoff of the industry. And so what we had decided to do in 2015 is something that we generally don't do, which is we're always looking for like kind of multidisciplinary show. But we saw this tsunami coming, and we made a big decision to focus on VR in 2015. So what we did was I found high and wide 11 VR works from a number of different artists, practitioners. There was performance artists, filmmakers, journalists, music video directors, installation artists, media scientists, internet artists, all engaging with this medium, and we put together a show. And so the struggle in terms of exhibition is, how do we create an environment that's new frontier, that's social, that's about people coming together and presenting this work in a medium that it just cracks you open. It makes you very vulnerable and maybe introspective. So what we decided to do is to create discrete environments for each of the pieces. So this is Assent by Oscar Raby. We recreated the room in which the piece works. Way to go. This was more of a video game dynamic, so we set it up as little gaming consoles with Felix and Paul. It's in the Gear VR, it's mobile, so we decided to kind of create little tiny stations that made it a space for, an identifiable space for the work that people can come to, but not entirely big environments, because that was sort of the key, that was the experience that delivered. And then Birdly was obviously sculptural, so, and I love sculpture when it comes into this space, so we just created a spotlight in the middle of the space. So it's both kind of taking advantage of its performative qualities and its sculptural awkwardness. I love this piece. Anyway, so 2016 was our 10th anniversary, and the 2015 show kind of broke open the tidal wave in terms of interest, in terms of investment in the space, and there was a lot of money coming into it. But not a lot of content, and I just kept reading that. Where's the content? Where's the content? So when the content actually exploded on my desk, like October in 2016, and that was our 10th anniversary, we decided, okay, well, we're going to use how we're setting up to make a bigger show to really answer this question of where's the content. It was we decided to do a very provocative show. We had 3 venues, one dedicated to VR, one was the exhibition. We also started, so New Frontier is also a lab. We have a New Frontier Story Lab and Residency. So we started a residency with Jaunt to answer an enormous request for, well, I love VR, how do we do it? So we set a residency. Our first resident was Lynette Wallworth. She made Collisions, which was a really remarkable piece that we collaborated with the World Economic Forum, and also did with them the very first synchronized screening of a VR. And that was kind of magical. That guy's smiling, it's not working for him, and he doesn't care because he's just happy to be there. And it was really that kind of like a magical moment. We also did an immersive journalism experiment. The MacArthur Foundation gave us money to pair creative technologists with a journalist and put them through the rigorous editorial process of the New York Times. So, and this was another sort of exhibition strategy, but at the same time, a ploy to keep journalism at the front of this field, because that's where it came from a journalist. And that piece was called The Click Effect by James Nestor and Sandy Smolin. So 2016, we also did about 15 mobile works. Google produced about 20,000 cardboards, and we took it not only around Park City, but we took it on the road. We showed it at the MoMA and also at Walker Arts Center. And we even dabbled with doing an app. It was terrible. It was a horrible failure. Instead, it was actually better for us to just put it on our website because of our philosophy. And I could go into that a little bit more later. And that was also the year that Vive came out. So we created very discrete environments. This is all photos of our Vivelandia. With a great producer who created these environments, basically a forest for Vive to introduce the technology. So that's a little bit, I could talk to you a little bit more about what we did this year, but I want to bring everybody else on so that we can have the discussion, which is always more interesting than just one person talking. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, first of all, for inviting us to do this panel. I think this is a really neat idea, and I've actually never spoken publicly about this program or had a conversation like this. So a little bit about myself. So I'm an immersive realities researcher. That's what I call myself. It'll probably change in 5 more years, but right now I like that. I research specifically how to elicit and measure things like feelings of awe and wonder in virtual reality, and use that knowledge to actually use deep learning and VR and VR installation systems for that purpose. So a lot of people don't know that SIGGRAPH is actually a volunteer-based conference. So all of us who are program chairs, including the general chair of the main conference, it's all volunteer time. We do it because this is something that is super cool for us, and that we love to do. And also, we get to be around some of the most cutting-edge technology and creative people in the world. So a little bit about SIGGRAPH. So most people are probably vaguely familiar with it. It stands, actually the acronym is long, that's why it's an acronym. It stands for Special Interest Group in Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques. So this has been around since 1969. The conference has started sometime in the mid-'70s, and they've been going on annually ever since. So it's also the largest conference on CG and interactive techniques in the world. And we expect around anywhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people that attend per year. So for us, that's a 5-day conference. It involves a festival, involves technical papers, talks, VR installations, emerging technologies, studio-based work, you name it. Anything pretty much goes, and that's kind of the reputation that SIGGRAPH is known for, is things that are new and emerging, brand new ideas, things that you wouldn't see quite yet because they're often in the prototype phase, but you could expect to see them possibly in 2 or 3 years down the line built into professional or consumer hardware. So a lot of people don't know too that the mixed reality and virtual reality has actually been at SIGGRAPH since the mid-'80s sometime. I've been trying to track down the roots of what that actually looks like, and some of the pioneers that I've talked to, they remember seeing VR there as early as like 83, 84, and it looks about what you would expect it to look like a massive helmet that had to be rigged up by cables, because if you actually let it go and rest on somebody's neck, it would have broken their neck. And what's often interesting to talk about is how, as time goes on, VR has become more, or it's become less esoteric, meaning that we're seeing a lot of subspecialties form. So SIGGRAPH is a great example of a conference where you had a very tiny amount of people who had access to computers and computing technologies in the 70s and 80s, and now this has become a nascent tech that everybody has in their pocket. There we go. I love this picture. I know you may not be able to see it well because the person, that's a human being, and they're laying face forward in a hang glider, a VR hang glider scenario, and that's from SIGGRAPH 93. And for a lot of people who've been around VR for some time, you might recall Evans and Sutherland's displays from 1967 onwards. So this was actually one of their experiences that they call Los Angeles 2000, which is kind of funny. They were actually suspended. And it's interesting because this was kind of the precursor to things like Birdly and these flying interfaces that we now see. So this is what it looked like then. And this is what it looks like now. So a little bit less state fair, a little bit more polished, and definitely a lot more people who are working in the area. So speaking of Birdly, that's the Vancouver mayor on the left, and this was very exciting for Vancouver when SIGGRAPH was there in August 2014. And it kind of was what kickstarted, at least for me, my involvement in SIGGRAPH, because at the time I was a volunteer for another program at SIGGRAPH called the Computer Animation Festival. And as a multimedia installation artist, I always felt very restricted when I was working with a flat screen, and I wanted to see more sensorial experiences somehow involved in the conference, and kind of get back to the roots of what it was in the early 90s with things like that paragliding experience. So in 2015, it was 2014, I proposed that we create a VR space. I did not know what it looked like. We were still working on the budget. We're actually working on every year changes the vision. So in 2015, we opened the doors to VR Village for the first time. And what happened was we curated the whole first program in 2015, and it was absolutely insane. Basically, what we did was we couldn't make a decision on what to show because VR was so new and emerging. So we just invited anybody, like literally anybody, to come and participate and bring their VR creations. We had a dome, we had installations, but we ended up with so many people. I think we had 78 contributors that in order to accommodate all of them, we swapped them in and out over the 5-day period. So there's a new group of people, up to 15, 20 people every single day, and I reckon I would never do that ever again. It was pretty intense. So now what we have is a juried program. So 2016 was our first year as a jury, and for those who have submitted to SIGGRAPH, you've probably been involved in this process, and you know that it's quite a rigorous process to go through regardless of what department and program that you submit to, because there could be up to 18 to 40 people who are both off-site and on-site reviewers who are looking at your work. And a lot of these people are super intimidating because they're computer graphics pioneers who invented techniques that we use every day now. And some are brand new who are students and very knowledgeable on the technique. So this is year 2015 that we brought a car in. And yeah, speaking of displaying VR to the public, this was an interesting one because I learned like a week before we brought the car in that you actually have to empty the gas tank out and to go through all these insurance and safety things because you can't have a car with fuel in it on the show floor. But this was a big hit because people actually got to crash the car like a test dummy while they were inside. Not as freaky as it sounds, actually. It was pretty cool, and that was a couple groups from Australia. And that one was very interesting because in Australia, of course, you drive on the other side of the road, so they actually had to redevelop their entire VR system to be on the proper side for people in LA, and that's about what it looked like. So we also, it's cool because there's a lot of carryover actually between SIGGRAPH and New Frontiers. As Shari was presenting, you might see a couple of repeats here. Things like synesthesia suit, which for me, I'm a huge fan of these multi-sensory experiences. And things like the AR microscope, Disney Research, who's always around, NASA, who tends to come year after year. This one ended up at South by Southwest about 8 months after it showed at SIGGRAPH, where you get to see 4 different perspectives at once in a VR display. VR sports, which is just kind of up and coming now. Industrial applications. Anything pretty much goes. Robots that you get to ride and experience VR. Robots that you get to be 15 feet off the ground and roll back and forth in. And of course, the infamous 2015 skull that we had to expand from Burning Man Festival. So, oh yeah, and this one is one of my favorites. They just showed up one day and said, we want to learn about VR, can you give us a little tour? And it was really cool seeing artists and creators start to take up on this area. And that's actually a system that they're using of Ken Perlin's, which made it even more intense. So I'll leave you on this slide because I feel like it's a little appropriate. We're in Switzerland. And this, of course, being a Swiss company. I remember when they came into SIGGRAPH 2015 and presented this amazing technology, which obviously has become even more groundbreaking to date. So that's it. That's my little overview.
So for those who are unfamiliar with the Phi Center, I would like to introduce you to our world so you can get a better sense of our mission, our history, and our activities. I'm not sure the slides are going to work. I'll start and then we'll see. So the Phi Center is a multidisciplinary cultural and artistic center which cultivates all forms of art, starting from its creation and development to its production and dissemination. Standing at the crossroad between art, new technologies, cinema, music, and design, and thanks to an eclectic program and the creation of original pieces, we at Phi are looking to be the place of unexpected meetings and conversations between artists and audiences. At the Phi Center, we also aim for the intersection of technology and culture in order to generate transformative experiences for our audience. Hence, we put technologies at the core of our mission and activities. With the support of virtual and augmented reality, as well as gaming, we now disseminate artwork relying on a variety of media, thereby allowing artists to directly evoke the audience's senses and trigger previously unattainable emotional responses. Headquartered in beautiful Montreal, Canada, Phi was created by Phoebe Greenberg in 2012. That's the building, and will celebrate its 5th birthday in June of this year. Our programming is driven by the urge to constantly explore new territories, whether through immersive and interactive exhibits, musical performances, film screenings, guest-curated installations, conferences, workshops, or multidisciplinary mixes. Our audience is being offered novel and eclectic experiences. As a multifunctional space with a strong stance towards technology, PHI also flourishes with activities and interconnectivity. Our spaces are interlinked and easily adjusted to fit the needs of various projects while pushing the boundaries of innovation, which is part of our DNA. You want to move? At the PHI Center, art is multifaceted, combining virtual and augmented reality, gaming, cinema, interactivity, and music. Our search for groundbreaking ideas is constant and guides our marked interest for advanced technology. Far from overwhelming and derailing us, the digital era and virtual reality fuel our innovative minds. Virtual reality has become our daily reality, no pun intended. More than a mere interest, it has become part of our motto and is integrated at the core of our mission. We are always looking for new ways to experiment in this domain and to provide the audience with different opportunities for confrontation with this new art form, which is a view we hold dearly. In line with this perspective, last year was marked by the launch of a permanent exhibit named Virtual Reality Garden, during which the audience is offered the opportunity to experiment with virtual reality. Since its opening in January 2016, this permanent exhibit provides a high-end selection of virtual reality artworks while offering a fresh perspective on some major current social issues. By combining 3D animation and immersive virtual reality, along with constant evolving programming and free admissions, we want to evoke novel and renewed sensations amongst our audience. What we are precisely trying to achieve at PHI is to set the stage for an adventure that takes the audience out of their comfort zone and leads them to dive into an unsettling yet undoubtedly stimulating artistic world. Still growing strong since its creation, on the edge of its 5th birthday, the PHI Center could not be holding a better ground to promote new technologies as VR, innovation, convergence, and artistic collaboration. As time goes by, we have become the go-to place for experiencing cutting-edge technologies on an international level, particularly with regards to VR. We could not be more pleased. Thanks to our rich collaborations, the PHI Center has become a major point of references, be it art-wise or technology-wise, as well as an international platform for stimulating conversations and encounters. During a 2012 interview with the Montreal Press, on the eve of the opening of the PHI Center, our founder, Phoebe Greenberg, was saying, "In all honesty, we have barely touched on all the artistic, digital, and technological perspective the PHI Center will help us explore. It is but the beginning of a long journey, which I hope will continue well beyond my time, and whose full potential will continue to grow with future generations." 5 years later, and without any reservations, we can reaffirm and stand by these words. Thank you.
So I'd like to kind of see what has surprised you in working in this field. Something that you didn't think was going to be an issue, or maybe something that the audience, the public really connected with that you didn't think was going to happen. So, Denise?
Sure, yeah, we were talking about this a little bit actually throughout the conference here. So for me, the surprise, although maybe it's not so much a surprise if you see it happening over time, is the shift from being tech-focused to emotion. So embracing the human factors, or the role that personal histories and emotion actually plays in being able to enjoy or have some sort of experience with the technology. And also the redefinition of VR, how that's changed from VR being exclusively a display type to now it's a full integrated system. VR is a medium. VR can utilize different tools. I feel like we're still shaping a lot of this language. But it's been surprising to see actually how rapidly. I didn't think it would be this quick.
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that. It was so surprising to see it explode so fast, so furiously, and it, to become a field that would leap quantumly every 3 months. That it's a very powerful experience, limited access. So to see so much money and energy and artists kind of coming in, not surprising that the powers that be will try to also contain and define it, but always heartening to find artists continuing to push not only the tech, but the expression and the embrace. And I'm actually surprised a bit that there's not more chatter about this as a mode of computing, as a do you know what I mean? There's a lot of talk about entertainment, a lot of talk about medicine and application of these modularized application of the technology. But I'm still, it went away. It was there before, and I'm a little surprised that it's gone, because I actually think that that's one of some of the biggest potentials of this technology is as a platform for computing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite amazing to realize how many events have been created around VR. Like the World VR Forum is a very good example. It's the 2nd edition, and already in 2 years, how many people they were able to have come here, how many works they were able to show. We in Montreal at the Phi Center, as I was saying earlier, we dedicated a permanent space in the center to VR. And it's incredible to realize every day you have over 100 people coming in, experiencing VR. Last year, I would say they were experiencing VR for the first time. This year, you see people are coming back because the programming is changing, obviously. So people are really into it. They want to know more. And yeah, it went so quick. It's quite incredible, actually.
I completely agree with everything. And I think it would be interesting to, I know this is a hard question to answer in a small amount of time, but if you could describe what you look for, what you connect with in an immersive kind of piece, how could you describe that in a few sentences?
I'm going to start I was at Tribeca a few weeks ago, and I tried a piece called Draw Me Close, which involves VR and immersive theater. And this piece, for me, it was not fair to the other pieces, actually, because this is the first I tried arriving in Tribeca. And this piece stayed with me the entire time. I couldn't let go. So for me, it was very emotional. And mixing virtual reality with immersive theater is, I think, is probably I don't want to say the next step, because I'm not, who am I to say that? But for me, it was very transformative.
What do I look for? I mean, this work is very subjective. There are no experts. I love that you said that, because it's exactly how I feel. So there's a subjectivity involved. So I definitely listen to myself. I try to study what my instincts look like, and trust my feelings. But I also am looking for things that are transformative. There's a transcendent quality in works. And I feel like I've, over the course of these decades that I've been doing this, I've come to trust that if I'm blown away, then it's probably going to blow somebody else away in the room as well. So I look for that, and I also look for, I try to see everything, anything good, anything bad, everything, because what I'm looking for are the things that distinguish themselves from the field, something that's pushing the world. I think, at New Frontier, that's what our biggest investment is to grow and to push the boundaries, to break the rules, to create new worlds. That's what I'm looking for.
I have to agree with both of these. It's for me, because I don't curate or program, at least not since 2015, I do leave it in the hands of the jury, and we do invite a couple pieces in particular that are so transformative is really the right way to put it, that they shall be included, absolutely. I mean, for the jury, what I do is I give them a criteria and a guiding principle. Every year has a bit of a theme. This year's SIGGRAPH theme is multi-sensory experiences. So seeing if people have the initiative and courage to do something completely wacky and out of this world. And maybe it doesn't work perfectly, maybe it does. That's where I find a lot of the magic happens, is in that kind of experimentation. So I like to invite those kind of works to submit, and the jury is very generous in understanding that these works don't have this kind of market polish yet, but that's part of the charm of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thank you. So for everybody here, I think virtual reality and immersive tech has been a very prominent feature in all of our lives, but it hasn't necessarily picked up with the general kind of public as fast or as quick as some people like, or maybe it happened quicker. But what do you think is a way that people who haven't experienced VR can enter into this field? How do you think we can start to connect with people who aren't at these festivals, who don't have the ability to go to, you know, Sundance, the World VR Forum? How can we get them to understand that, you know, VR is not just for festival goers or, you know?
Well, if I may, you have to come to FI. I mean, the FI Center, as I was saying earlier, like, we dedicated a permanent space. So by doing that, we try to make this form of art accessible to as many people as possible. So we would need more FI Center around the world to open, to give access to people to this type of not taking anything away from Sundance or Tribeca, where it's really event-based, and that's their mission. But we need more center like us. I mean, there are some others, but that make this type of technology accessible to as many people as possible.
Yeah, I add on to that by saying the local meetup groups are huge. So a lot of people here have probably participated in or even started one. I know in North America it's meetup.com is kind of the prevalent platform for that. But I've also seen just pub nights, like VR pub nights, and they open up the door and anyone who wants to come in comes in. But I also encourage practitioners to start using web VR, because I think it's a platform that has great potential to not only accessibility, but to open up that creativity and allow for a lot of these experiences to end up in the hands of basically anyone who has an internet connection.
Yeah, I mean, the organic growth of the field, I think, is helping it quite a bit. We always have to remember that we're 3 years into this. And so the explosion is, even though the demand is high, might feel like we're not doing enough, let's not discount what is being done out there. And it's kind of amazing. Now Venice has a competition for VR. I mean, who knew that Venice Film Festival, like one of the oldest, more conservative, but there's, I think there's a place to play these events. Centers like yours, through or IMAX VR. There's a lot of sort of arcades that are kind of coming up. But I also think that the coming wave of social VR is probably going to, I kind of agree that that's going to kind of open up points of access as the tech becomes more accessible to access these social environments, like High Fidelity and Samsara it's called. There was something else I wanted to say. It'll come back Tourette style.
So, Myriam, you talked about kind of what you hope to see more immersive theater, and you just talked about kind of social VR. Can you talk a little bit more about what you hope is going to be the future in the next couple of years, what people start focusing on a bit more, what kind of projects you hope to get more involved with? Myriam?
That's a tough question.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. Some of the things that are just, and one of the areas that I'm really interested in is where VR meets IRL in various ways. From walking experiences and new tech that's supporting a further exploration in those kinds of experiences. Where I'm also interested in social VR and what it means to meet the people that you've met online in real life, because that is a very interesting transition socially. There's something to, and I really love that piece too by the Royal National Theatre, Draw Me Close. And I've seen a couple of other pieces of theater that use virtual, not really VR, but borrow some of the tropes of VR, binaural sound in a theater setting that brings you to another kind of level of reality, hyper reality. This is a very interesting thing for me.
I love sensors, so the idea of hooking yourself up or wearables. I think people already have a fascination with things like Fitbit, and they like to know what's inside and bring that to the out. There's obviously a lot of issues in the world. A lot of people like to suggest that theater, film is a great way to escape the reality of day-to-day life, and I'm not in favor of that position, especially as it applies to the immersive realities. I feel like this has a potential to help transform or to transcend a lot of the problems and possibly even find solutions. Things like the social VR to allow you to feel interconnectivity. There's so much research that shows that once you start seeing people literally as people with feelings, emotions, and you start caring about them, your entire perspective and your behavior changes over time, and things that you do in your life also change. Also education. So the idea of incorporating VR and AR into education measures is something that's quite early. I would like to see more of it. It's one area that seems to be a little bit more academic focused, but I think there's a ton of potential in that. Personally, I would like to see a lot more of that.
I also totally think that social VR is very strong, and it's going to be even stronger in the next years. Some of the pieces that were very strong for me in the last years are those kind of pieces. Coming back to immersive theater, mixing with VR, I think it would be interesting to see in the next years how other artistic forms could mix with VR, like being music, being contemporary art. I was just at the Venice Biennale a few days ago, and I actually was surprised. Maybe there were, but I didn't see any pieces, VR pieces related to contemporary art. So mixing disciplines, I think, could be very interesting in the next years.
Thank you. And we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to open this up to the audience. If there's anything that you would like to ask any one of these individuals, please raise your hand.
Thank you so much. It's so super exciting, let me say this in advance, to have 3 top ladies in VR on one panel. That's really an amazing discussion here. I'm lucky enough to go to festivals and watch installations or suits, and do you have any ideas how we can open up this to the public to make it possible for a broader mass to watch installations or all this stuff you're displaying on your festivals? What I'm realizing is that even whole branches working in VR are not aware of what's going on in an artistic, creative way, that industrial developers don't know what's really going on, pushing the boundaries forward, and it would really be a benefit to open it to a broader publicity. So I have no clue how to do it. Maybe you have some ideas.
I mean, it's amazing that we find this ourselves in this place where it's just we cannot meet the demand. The demand is so strong for this space and to experience the space, be a part of it. It's just that's a good problem to have, but it still begs the question, and keep asking the question, because that's going to spur us on. But there are things that are happening, like these. Like the IMAX Center is now basically a theater right across the street from, the Grove. You don't like that, IMAX Center?
Well, I've seen that in LA, and maybe I've chosen the wrong slot, but they display games, basically. So they have 14 boxes with Vives,
So you're disappointed with the content. It's just getting started. I mean, the content will diversify over the course of time. To a certain extent, we have to be careful about embracing the youth, the emergence, the nascency of this field, and to allow for growth. It's important to have our demands, but also to acknowledge that that it's very young, and we're just getting started. It still have a hard time getting enough headsets at festivals to meet the small demand at the festivals, you know, not to mention a public. But, you know, what the New York Times is doing is very interesting. The New York Times VR, I don't know if you have that app, or these apps that, you know, Within has an app that you can get VR on your phone. And that's, if you have cardboard or, you know, or gear, you can, you know, go out and buy these headsets and have these kinds of experiences for very affordable price points. But I think with NVR, New York Times is doing something very, I think, especially admirable, because they're pushing not only the medium of VR, they're pushing the field of journalism, and that's something that's established. Everybody recognizes it. We all need it, and they're bringing a new medium to a very important social function.
If I bring it back again to the Phi Center, I was telling you earlier that so we dedicated a permanent space to virtual reality, like call our VR garden. What we did also in the last 2 years, and we're going to do a third exhibition, it's an exhibition called Sensory Stories. It's a collaboration between the Phi Center and Future of Storytelling, which is an event in New York. And it's 15 pieces as are part of the exhibition. VR, AR, immersive, interactive. We added gaming also in the last year. In the last 2 years, the exhibitions were running for 6 to 8 weeks. This year, we're going to run the exhibition for 6 months. So it's going to open mid-July, and it will end just before Christmas, because we realized that the demand is totally there. And we decided after closing just before Christmas, we're going to open a new exhibition in probably January or February that will run for probably 6 months again. So the demand is there, and we're trying to give as many opportunities as people to come and see those type of works.
I should quickly mention, too, the mobile lineup that we had in 2016 is actually accessible on our website. It's sundance.org/VR, and it will take you to the 15 works. So that's also another place that you can access some of this stuff.
I think we have time for one more question. Pfeiffer?
Hey, yeah? Okay. So you were talking about immersive theater and how theater was fusing with this, and that's something that's sort of organic with virtual reality. What other forms of art or practices do you see that are really coming into the VR sphere in a strong way?
A lot of dance, so a lot of movement-based works. There's actually one here, the Through You. And there's been a lot of people who practice, I mean, historically with motion capture, and now that technology is becoming more accessible and affordable, and there's different systems, and you don't even need the optical tracking system anymore for these performative or these motion-based artworks. Now I've seen people just put the controllers and leap motions on their body, and it works. I think that, especially with music and dance and these highly engaging motion-based works, is something I've seen more from like a smaller cultural perspective, but I think is starting to pick up steam.
I feel like I also see more and more haptic environments being developed specifically for certain experiences like Tree or like Hana Hana downstairs that you can see here. Environments that you know, this work really needs to be in that environment to have the intended experience. It's not just a set decoration or kind of setup. It's actually an endemic part of it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank our 3 amazing panelists.
Thanks for having us.
This was wonderful.